We're really going to do this right now. The 10 myths of hiring top performing salespeople. I'm Dave Kurlan. I'm the CEO at Kurlan and Associates, and I've been helping companies hire salespeople for almost 40 years. And there's more than 10 myths, but I'm going to share the 10 that I see being practiced most often. And they're all myths that lead to mishires, that lead to improper expectations on the part of the hiring manager and the salesperson. So the first question we have to answer is, who exactly will this apply to? And I think it applies to everybody because this is more about your part in the sales hiring process. Doesn't matter whether you're a CEO, a CRO, a sales leader, a sales manager, an HR director, a recruiter. If you get involved in the hiring process, it's going to apply. Doesn't matter whether you have a startup or a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The rules are the same, the expectations are the same, and most importantly, the mistakes that get made are the same. So, are you ready for the first myth? How many of you have ever interviewed a salesperson and gotten all excited because you learned they were the top salesperson at your biggest competitor? And if you hire them, all those great accounts are coming with them and they're going to become your accounts. Not. How often have you ever seen that work out? And in financial services, especially, that's the most appealing thing of all when it comes to bringing on new members of the sales team. They're bringing their client book. Well, we don't see that happen very often. And here's where it gets worse. Top salesperson at our biggest competitor, and it's a young person. Well, that shouldn't be very exciting. That means the clients preceded the salesperson. Top salesperson at our biggest competitor, and it's a seasoned veteran. Well, that shouldn't be very exciting either because they're going to leave you soon enough. This just rarely works, and I've got the receipts. So I'm going to use sprinkled throughout today's presentation. I've got some data that I'm going to share. Some of it's data from Kurlan, some of it's data from Objective Management Group, but it's all backed by science. So here's the reality. If you're lucky enough to hire one of the best salespeople in the world, top 5%, elite, even in the best case, you get one of those. Only 59% of them get their clients to come along with them. And if you're in the next cohort, the next 15%, 54%. So now you're in hit or miss territory. And if you're in the bottom 50% of salespeople, and let's face it, the majority of your salespeople are in the bottom 50% of all salespeople, they're only successful at getting about a third of the time their customers, their clients to follow along. So that's not anything you can bank on. It's a big myth. Myth number two, salespeople have to be a good fit. Well, a lot of people that say that, they are misimagining what fit is. They're basing it on cultural fit. They're basing it on personality fit. They're basing it on industry experience. Oh, I could pull my hair out. It's amazing I have a full head of hair because over 40 years, if I pulled a hair out every time somebody says they've got industry experience, so what? It doesn't matter. Then there are your conscious and unconscious biases, and you want the salesperson to match up with those biases. And then you have age-based biases. Some people want to hire young blood. Some people want to hire veterans. Some people want to hire people with a technical background. Well, those fits might be nice to have, but they're not the difference maker. They're not the fits that cause people to be top performers. Let's look at what is compatibility for the role and compatibility with the audience you sell to. I'd rather they never spent a minute in your industry, but they've spent the last 20 years selling to the people that you sell to. Now that's a good fit. I'd rather they never sold in your industry, but they've sold the way you need them to sell. They've called on the people you need them to call on. They've sold at your price point. They've sold against your competition. They've sold in your length of sales cycle. They've sold with all the challenges that you face. Then you're talking fit. Now, some more OMG data to support the concept of fit. Out of the 2.5 or so million salespeople that have been assessed, only 25% have been recommended for the role. So that means 3 out of 4 salespeople that you're considering aren't ideal for the role. Some of them are too strong for the role. Some of them are too weak for the role. But most of them just don't fit the role because of their own capability limitations. Another 23% are worthy of consideration. You go to the worthy group when you don't have enough of the recommended groups. They're not the best. They're on the cusp. They're probably a couple of points below the line in the sand where they wouldn't get a recommendation. And half of all salespeople are not recommended for the role. And that's pretty consistent with what we see companies getting for results when they're hiring salespeople. It's hit or miss. They hit on half, they miss on half. Myth number 3, resumes are a good indicator of fit. Really? See the resume that I have on the slide there? That's a pretty looking resume. HR directors love resumes that are pretty like that. And then you see, you might not be able to see. If you're on a laptop, it might be too small. But the job at the bottom says sales rep, and the next job up says sales manager, and the next job up from that says sales executive. And you might say, love that person's track record. Well, for the most part, resumes are works of fiction. Salespeople even work with resume consultants to fix up their resumes and pretty up their resumes and make up their resumes to make them look appealing to you. They're purposely vague. They aren't real clear about what they've accomplished. They're purposely misleading. And I'll tell you the things I hate the most when it comes to salespeople. All the bullet points are claims of accomplishment. I hate those. I want to know that they accomplished something, but when the claims of accomplishment are about spearheaded something, developed something, led something, took responsibility for something, created something, initiated something, all those initiations and bullet points tell me they didn't sell anything. The only thing I want to see in the resume is everything they sold and how many quarters they were above quota. Nothing else matters. It's all noise. So some of your resume superstars, the people with the best resumes, are often lacking in the actual selling experience that you need them to have in order to be successful in your world. And then some of the people whose resumes made it seem like they lack the relevant experience actually have it, but they never thought to include it in their resume. So I am a significant downplayer of resumes. I don't even look at them until it's time to interview somebody. And then I'll look at the resume and mark it up so I know what I want to talk to them about. Myth number 4, gut instinct is a good predictor for sales success. Well, let's take a look at that. This graph is courtesy of Andy Miller's book, The Science of Hiring Quota Busting Sales Teams. And specifically when it comes to gut instinct, you can see it's not very predictive. It's down there with culture tests and traditional interviews. And resumes are down there at 18%. But traditional interview, look at that, 20% in terms of how effective it is for picking out a top performing salesperson. And then look at some of the other things that aren't very predictive, like personality tests and reference checks, skills tests. And what's the most effective, the most predictive? A sales specific multi-measurement assessment. And that's what OMG has, Objective Management Group, where a lot of today's data comes from. 91% predictive validity. Myth number 5, speaking of assessments, assessments don't work. Well, that's actually a true statement. Assessments don't work unless you use the right assessments the right way. So most assessments don't work, especially personality assessments and behavioral styles assessments. Now, if you use them with the right expectations, like you use a personality assessment to understand what their personality traits are, or use a behavioral styles assessment to understand what their tendencies are, that's fine, but they're not predictive of sales effectiveness or sales performance. They're they are what they say they are. They show you the insides of somebody's personality or tendencies. Um, but a sales specific assessment, like what OMG has, that's a different story. So take a look at this infographic. Of the companies that don't use any assessment at all, they have 49% quota attainment. That's pretty close to the national average, right? For years we've been hearing of numbers in between 47 and 57% of all salespeople hitting quota. So that's in that range. And 19% attrition, that's also in the range of what we typically see on a sales team. Now, the companies that use any assessment, anyone at all, their quota attainment goes up above average, up 4 points over the top end of the typical annual rates of 57%, and attrition drops by 5%. So that's an improvement. But of the companies that use OMG's sales specific candidate assessments, they achieve 88% quota attainment on the salespeople who are hired using this assessment, and attrition drops to 8%. Those are some pretty eye-opening statistics. It makes a difference. Myth number 6. It's going to take a month to hire and deploy a salesperson. And anybody who's still saying that hasn't tried hiring any salespeople. Here's some data from Indeed. Indeed says that 44% of its candidates hear from employers within a couple of weeks of applying. A couple of weeks? That's crazy. What a great example of recruiters and HR and sales leadership not being aligned on sales hiring process, practices, and steps, and responsibility, and actions, and timing. That's inexcusable. And 37% hear back within a week. You can't wait a week in this day and age. The few good candidates that are out there get snatched right up, and only 4% hear back within a day. You should be among the companies of the candidates who hear back within a day. There's more. If you're doing it the right way, if you have a proper sales specific recruiting process in place, first contact to online application completion, to completing a sales specific assessment, to a first phone screen, to a first interview, to a final interview, offer, and 2 weeks notice and deployment. At best, that's 5 weeks from when you first post the job, if one of the very first respondees is one that gets hired. Otherwise, it's going to take a lot longer because you're going to repeat this process until you get not the first decent one available, but the one you're looking for. You have to have patience. So you should expect it to take 90 days to hire salespeople. 90 days. Myth number 7. We determine how long it takes for a salesperson to become productive. And from my experience, those determinations that companies and their sales leaders make, it's arbitrary, it's made up, it's invented. Like, yeah, our salespeople, they should be productive in 3 months. Or, we give them a lot of rope and a lot of runway, and we expect them to be productive within a year. And I ask, what are you basing this on? Well, our best salespeople were productive inside of 3 months. I said, but not everybody is going to be your best salesperson. I mean, maybe that was an aberration. What do you base a year on? Well, the typical crappy salespeople we hire take a year. So why are you settling for that? Why are you compromising? There are sales person variables, but there are some standardizations, and I'll share a formula with you that will work no matter what business you're in. Time to productivity, easy for me to say, time to productivity. Take the length of your sales cycle in months and add to that the length of your learning curve. That's the number of days, weeks, or months before a salesperson can have an intelligent conversation with a prospect about their problems and your solutions. Add those two time periods up. Let's say your sales cycle is 6 months and your learning curve is 2 months. That's 8 months. Add another 30 days for transition. And at the 9 month point, your salespeople should be bringing in enough business so that they can live off their commissions and you won't have to subsidize them anymore. But use the formula. That should be the standard. Now, there's also candidate variations, and most of them are based on a finding in the OMG assessment called Figure It Out Factor, FIOF. These are the 21 sales core competencies on the OMG dashboard. The first 5 competencies are in the category of will to sell. It's how much heart they have or grit they have. The second 6 competencies are sales DNA, the strengths that are required to support their execution of sales process and sales methodology and sales strategy and sales tactics. And then the next 10, those are the tactical selling competencies that we all talk about. But on the second page of the dashboard, highlighted here in red, is figure it out factor. That's how quickly a salesperson will ramp up. And when they have a figure it out factor of over 75, that's a candidate that's going to ramp up more quickly than typical. And the higher that score is, the more quickly they'll ramp up. The lower that score is, the longer it's going to take for them to ramp up. And you can have plotters who ramp up slowly, who are still top performing salespeople. And you can have salespeople who ramp up very quickly and they peak too early. So, what are their actual capabilities and what is their fit for the role? And then how quickly will they ramp up? We're up to myth number 9. Good companies and nice managers attract better salespeople. Most of the companies and most of the sales leaders I work with are nice people, but they don't make out any better than anybody else. It doesn't seem to make a difference. Let's take a look. The number one criteria for salespeople today in 2024 looking for work is that there be a remote option. They don't care whether you're nice or not. They want a remote option. And the second thing they want is a high upside on commission. That nothing else matters. How much can I make and can I work remotely? Now, not everybody's well suited for working remotely. And the OMG assessment has a finding for how suitable your salespeople are for working remotely. And they also have some findings that correlate directly to their ability to work on commissions. And I'm not suggesting you need to be on straight commission, but straight salary doesn't appeal to top performing salespeople, which brings us to myth number 10. DEI gives us a competitive advantage. Okay. Now, if you're on here and you're a proponent of DEI and you want to hate me for making this one of the myths, go ahead. I'm used to it, but I'm going to speak truth. So let's look at DEI and its place in hiring salespeople. First, the I piece doesn't have anything to do with hiring salespeople. That's inclusion. That comes later, and that's about people wanting to be heard, part of the conversation. The E part, equity, that's for equal outcomes. Equal outcomes. That means pay everybody the same, or participation trophies like Little League. And the D part, diversity. I think diversity is great. Everybody should want diversity. But let me give you a tale of two clients. Both clients were hiring salespeople. The first client, they were hiring 28 salespeople, and my company was going to do the recruiting for that. So we ask a ton of questions, dozens of questions, if we're going to engage in a recruiting project for a client, because it's very labor intensive and we have no control over how long it takes, in this case, to hire 28 salespeople. It ended up taking a year to get to 28. And of the dozens of questions that I asked was, do you have a DEI initiative? And they said, oh, yes. I said, great. I said, and what's more important? Rank them, diversity or talent. And they said, talent. And if they can also be diverse, that's great. Okay. The second client, they were hiring 60 salespeople. Same questions, the same diversity question. Rank them. What's more important, diversity or talent? And they said diversity. I said, are you sure? They said, yes, diversity trumps all. Okay. So that also took a year. So here was the net outcome. In client number one, the very first 10 quality candidates that we referred to them, and we do a very intense vetting process. We write the job postings, we decide where the job postings are going to go, we control the applicant tracking, we get them to complete an online application, we control the candidate assessment, they take the candidate assessment, we've spec'd it. Only the recommended candidates get phone interviews. We run a quick 5-minute phone interview to make sure they have the background we're looking for and to make sure they sound great on the phone. Those who score the best get an interview. We do the first interview over Zoom. Then we do a background check. And then the best candidates get referred to the client. So it doesn't sound anything like what recruiters do. So of the first 10 quality candidates we referred to client number one, 5 of those candidates were diversity candidates. When they have the talent, they rise to the top, regardless of their ethnicity, their gender, their ideology. Doesn't matter. The talent is there. They'll rise to the top. Candidate number 2 got diverse candidates as a priority. So here's the outcome. Of the 28 salespeople that client number 1 handled, 26 of them remained 2 years later. They only lost 2, and all 26 are meeting and exceeding quota. They wanted talent, and diversity is a bonus. They got talent and diversity, and they're all killing it. Client number 2, they wanted diversity, and talent was the bonus. They've turned over half the sales team, and nobody is meeting quota. It's a sample size of 2, I understand. But when it comes to sales, the economic engine of the company, you have to put talent first. That's the job of sales. Bring in the revenue. And if you don't bring in the revenue, then everybody's job is at stake. The company suffers. The lack of growth stifles innovation. And I know we're focusing on hiring today. We're not focusing on training issues or coaching issues or sales process issues or sales team evaluations or any of the myriad other things that we often talk about. But when you focus on talent first, you're going to have fewer problems with salespeople not hunting. You're going to have fewer problems with salespeople skipping over discovery so that they can do a demo. You're going to have fewer problems with lack of thorough qualification. You're going to have fewer problems with salespeople not making a good first impression. When you put talent first, your sales team will thrive, revenue will grow, profits will be there, and everybody will be happy. So we're approaching the bottom of the hour, and I'm going to pause right here and take questions for 5 minutes, and then I'll let you all go. So if you have a question, you can pop it into the Q&A, or you can pop it into the chat. Bernie said, what was number 8? I seem to have missed that. Um, I make mistakes. Maybe I skipped 8. Maybe I went from 7 to 9. I don't know. Um, let's see. Myth number 8. Myth number 7, time to productivity. It was there. Oh, that was 7, 9, 10. You're right. How about a bonus myth? HR and sales management know how to hire top performing salespeople. See, always be prepared. Always expect something's going to go wrong. I had a bonus myth just in case. I skipped a myth. I skipped number 8. So, no disrespect to HR and no disrespect to sales management, but hiring salespeople is different. And HR usually goes about the process of doing the top end of the sales recruiting process the same way they recruit for every other role in the company. And typically they can look around the company, look at every role, look at every person they've placed, and go, I've done a really good job filling the roles in this company. And I'm proud of myself. I just wish I could have the same success when it came to the sales department because everybody's either underperforming or turning over. And sales managers have this hit or miss thing going on. Nobody wants to admit that they don't understand how drastically hiring salespeople is different, drastically different from hiring everybody else, but it is. Okay, so I apologize for initially missing number 8, and I hope the bonus myth made up for that. Um, John asked if this webinar is available as a lead generation. I don't know what you mean, John. As a lead generation for who? For us? Absolutely. We'll repurpose this and generate leads from it. Ron asks if attendees get the deck. If you request the deck, you'll get the deck. Any other questions? How about questions about the myths? How about questions about hiring salespeople? How about questions about um, getting it right more often than getting it wrong? Or not? Okay. Well, we've we've reached the bottom of the hour, and I do want to thank you for attending. If you want to reach out, my team is always ready and available to help, whether it be with hiring salespeople, getting their hands on our OMG sales specific candidate assessment, or anything else having to do with the sales function. We are full service and always aim to please. Feel free to reach out to me directly at dkurlan@kurlanassociates.com, and I will have someone from the team reach out and get in touch with you promptly. Thank you so much for attending today. I hope you enjoyed the 10 myths, and I hope to see you again for a presentation after the new year. Bye, everybody.